And now, as our chalice lighters, Werner Heber and Sherrod Beal, come forward, I invite us to stand and share together the affirmation of faith printed on the back of the order of service. At home, folks, I invite you to light your own chalice, and here in the sanctuary, we will repeat the affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human needs. For these high purposes do we unite in worship.
So can we all say the Pledge of Allegiance to the environment as we like the chalice? It's on your program.
Yeah. I pledge the allegiance to the earth and all the life which she supports, one planet in our care, irreplaceable, with sustenance and respect for all.
The earth is what we all have in common. We have lived our lives by the assumption that what was good for us would be good for the world. We have been wrong. We must change our lives so that it will be possible to live by the contrary assumption, that what is good for the world will be good for us. And that requires that we make the effort to know the world and learn what is good for it. The care of the earth is our most ancient, most worthy, and after all, our most pleasing responsibility. To cherish what remains of it and to foster its renewal is our only legitimate hope for survival.
Good morning. How many of you have had some type of spiritual experience by being out in nature, out in the woods, down in a canyon, on a mountaintop, on a river? Show your hands. Yeah, just about everybody here. Wonderful. When I first started learning about Unitarian Universalism, I was drawn to its 7 principles, particularly number 7. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence and personal experience. Also attractive to me was the UU's living tradition of wisdom and spirituality drawn from sources as diverse as science, poetry, and personal experience. The UU's acknowledgement of the sacred circle of life that instructs us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature also spoke to the depths of my being. My religion is based in nature. I was fortunate to grow up in and around woods and mountains. My occupations, such as they were as a biologist, a teacher, a photographer, and tour guide, provided wonderful opportunities for me to visit and explore exotic locations around the globe. These experiences always aroused in me a sense of curiosity, wonder, mysticism, and gratitude. It's difficult to put into words and talk about the spirituality that one encounters in nature. Through the years, I've had a number of such experiences. I'm often reminded about a special moment when I found myself alone on a snowy evening in northwestern Connecticut. It was several centuries ago when I was in graduate school. As others headed to the warm sandy beaches in Florida, I reserved 5 days and 4 nights in a remote rustic cabin nestled among tall pine trees on the flanks of Bear Mountain, the highest point in Connecticut. The Appalachian Trail, of which I was intimately familiar, wound a crooked course nearby and up and over the mountain's summit. On my 5th and final day, as I was heading back toward my car on a remote icy trail, I paused for a moment beside a meadow. It was snowing, a big, heavy springtime snow, and I stopped and leaned on my ski poles. I did not want to leave and go back into the hustle and bustle and noise of the outside world. How long I lingered there, I have no idea. It could have been 10 minutes, it could have been 2 hours. I have no idea. I stood there leaning on my ski pole, suspended in time, transformed into the landscape. It was one of those special times when one is open to it, something sacred reveals itself, and the land knows that you are there. I know that this sounds crazy, but I became an integral part of that field filling up with snow. It was so much so that after a while, a chickadee came and landed on the snowshoes that were lashed to the pack on my back and eventually started singing. When I became aware of what was happening, I laughed out loud. The bird flew away, but the magic remained. Last week, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said that the Earth will likely cross a threshold beyond which I can't avoid catastrophic climate change within the next decade unless we rapidly stop burning fossil fuels. I was stunned, not by the proximity of that threshold, but by my lack of reaction to it. After reading the news, I forwarded it to a few friends and then went back to do what I was doing. Maybe you did the same. The normalization of cataclysmic climate change news is happening at the same time those same words are becoming increasingly bleak. This is a terrible dichotomy. How do scientists, journalists, liberal politicians, and concerned citizens, prompt mobilization and action instead of apathy and hopelessness? We must constantly remind ourselves that we are all in this together and we are all connected in the web of life. I'd like to think that millions are waking up out of their sleep. It's our duty to protect Mother Nature from those greedy politicians and corporations who refuse to see her beauty and her worth to each one of us. We are part of the earth, and the earth is part of us. We have a right to clean water, clean air, and food that is safe to eat. We must all do our part, and when people come together and demonstrate and work to elect politicians, there is hope. Do what you can, be energy efficient, reduce, repair, reuse, recycle. I live in a passive and active solar house that each year generates more energy than it uses. I have not owned a clothes dryer for over 35 years. I use refill, use a reusable water bottle, bring my coffee mug to meetings, and I also take it with me when I travel. I have also begun to bring my own food container for the leftovers when I dine out. This prevents packaging waste and wasted food. I shop locally when I can. Today I'm wearing Patagonia clothing, a very environmentally friendly company, and I can talk more about that during the reflection time. There's a lot that they do. I think that it's important to stay in touch with three qualities as we go through our lives, which are offered most freely and easily in nature. The first is natural beauty. We have to have a dynamic relationship with the beauty around us. We need to be in touch with the beauty of the natural world. It opens our hearts and makes us realize we are part of nature and it is not separate from us. The next is community. Not just with each other, but with all living things. We need to be able to see the earth as the astronauts see it, as a ball of light and life, hurtling through the darkness and void with no national boundaries. A sense of how important it is to be on this planet and how important it is that what we do to each other, we do to ourselves. Lastly, mystery. Nature puts us in touch with things that we never fully understand and know the answers to, and yet it calls forth an imaginative existence that is essential to living in this world. It serves our creative ability to become an educator, mathematician, artist, and scientist. So observe nature carefully and love the earth. Live simply, stand up to injustice by reducing our consumption of fossil fuels and becoming involved in political process to motivate our leaders to address climate change, we can help protect our local and global ecosystems. Each one of us must do what we can. Every little bit helps. We have a duty to unite and move forward as a species. This is a market-based economy. If we as consumers demand environmentally friendly products over more wasteful products, it will begin to make a difference. In our hands now lies not only our future, our own future, but that of all other living creatures with whom we share this beautiful and precious planet we call Earth. Thank you.
Another somewhat overlapping perspective. I've felt for a long time a responsibility to be aware of the science of climate change. As Robert said, the most recent International Panel on Climate Change tells us we can now expect and are even now experiencing increasingly severe, dramatic, and erratic changes to our climate without multiple, diverse interventions. We're approaching significant systemic tipping points of many of our world systems, some that we know about, like glaciers and ice caps retreating, oceans rising, significant species extinction, etc. And there's probably other turning points that we don't even know about yet, or how close we are to them. The uncertainty is large, and how much and how quickly we may be able to affect those processes is uncertain. In my more pessimistic moods, I experience anticipatory grief and anxiety as I think about the likelihood, perhaps even the inevitability, of cascading impacts of these changes and what that means to our interrelationship and the future of all life, especially the future that my kids and theirs to the seventh generation will experience. I think about how really big and complex the problem is and how short a time frame we have to forestall the worst impacts and how much it's going to take to make that curve turn downward. And the picture is not pretty and maybe even scary, but dwelling on that is not helpful, nor is it a state I like to live in. The alternative to being a climate ostrich is both unappealing and untenable to me. So I'm working on building my sense of hope. I take a cue from David Orr, who in the January 14th issue of The Climate Optimist said, "Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up." I agree with that. Hope is strong. The benefits of hope are so powerful that some doctors even use it as a therapeutic tool. Hope can make you feel better. Hope can create measurable improvements in health and inspire action to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. I love that hope is available anytime we're willing to work for it, and hope is totally within our control, even when so many uncomfortable things are not. As a result, I'm specifically attracted to learning what people are doing to remediate climate change, and there's a lot, some of which I get from reading Darcy Hitchcock's Good News You Wanted blog. I don't know if you are reading about it. Remember Darcy from our summer series last year. A couple of other examples, just briefly. Just this week we learned in the film Kiss the Earth that changes in agricultural practices have shown great promise in positively impacting our environment. And locally, just found this out, Mountain Middle School, where 3 of my grandkids have attended, they became one of a few schools nationally to reach nearly 100% zero and carbon neutrality. So cool. I'm encouraged by the increasing progress of science, technology, and the increasing awareness and concern about climate change. There's a lot going on out there that contributes to building a more hopeful path. The science says that every fraction of a degree increase in global average temperature that we can prevent will make a difference, a noticeable difference. It's a huge challenge to think about, but being an active actor can be thrilling and can bring more meaning and connection into our lives. Throughout history, people have overcome incredible odds to achieve transformational change. Systems do shift. Small actions do make collectively meaningful contributions. In fact, if you think about it, that's how we got here now, through incremental steps, actually downhill if you think about it, or maybe uphill if you think about the curve, over the last couple of 100 years. But the science also tells us that we don't have a couple of 100 years to reverse the curve. And it's not just big science, technology, and government action that's needed. Gus Space is an environmental lawyer, and he said, he was the founder of National Resources Defense Council. He said, I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I was wrong. Top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with that, we need cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. But perhaps we use do. There is great urgency. We need an all hands on deck, all of the above set of accelerated actions that do and that do everything that we can as soon as possible. So in thinking about my own responsibility to the earth, to the future of my kids and grandkids and theirs, I want to reconcile this huge global problem with my personal choice of actions. I can't do anything about our past actions that have contributed some of the 25% of carbon now in the atmosphere that we in the U.S. are responsible for, either out of ignorance or indifference or greed. And just by living, I'm going to continue to be part of that contribution. But at what level? I'm not in charge of the big rock issues like government mandating more efficient fuel standards or legislating against the destruction of our boreal forests, although I can work to influence my legislators and work and vote with environmental priorities. I can drive less and more efficiently in an EV. I can buy non-paper, mostly recycled paper products that don't require new timber. I keep the global challenge in mind and accept a personal moral responsibility to do what I can to support a more sustainable environment. In preparing for today, I decided to take a quick inventory of what Bonnie and I are currently doing with our overt local environmental consciousness to lighten our environmental impact. I was a bit surprised that the list grew to around 30 different small rock actions, from installing solar panels, more insulation, on-demand electric water heater, to buying bamboo, toilet paper, composting, eating less red meat, doing the work of EJT here, buying refills at Refill, carbon offsets at 4Core. It's interesting to me that most of these now seem more like a habit than requiring any particular change or effort. I wonder what would be on your lists as you take your daily active choices in this everyday, in the spirit of an everyday Earth Day. To what extent are you called to be part of the solution? I do ask myself if I'm doing enough. For example, I'm still occasionally flying. I haven't yet bought an EV or a heat pump, or I haven't stopped eating meat entirely, but when I do, it's James Ranch grass-fed natural beef. And this list could go on. I do feel that I'm making a difference in my small way, though. Doing these small things helps me feel good and hopeful and a part of the solution. When you ask yourself, am I doing enough? What is it that comes up for you? I take the work that we do to get past the selfishness, greed, apathy as a spiritual endeavor. And for the rest of my life, I want to do the best I can to use the resources of the planet as effectively and responsibly as possible. We come to church to be transformed, but also to transform. All of our small environmentally conscious acts are contributions to the transformation of the earth into an ecologically sustainable place. We need the accumulation of all the small changes that we will contribute to fill in the spaces between the big rocks that are being addressed elsewhere. You've all heard about the butterfly effect. Who knows what impact any one of us, any one of our small conscious acts of environmental protection will result in. To the extent that our level of alarm and concern is shared, I'm confident that we will act appropriately. Another part of my building hope is that the conversation about our environmental challenge is becoming more public, more overt. All the big systemic changes that need to be made may not be enough, but we can build hope by showing up in many different ways, big and small for us. And if enough of us are adding our many small pebbles to the jar, we just might reach a different tipping point, one that turns the curve in the other way. I still struggle to be optimistic, but I can feel hopeful because I do believe that when we roll up our sleeves together to pull hard in the right direction, we will make the necessary difference. So please join me and the rest of the EJT for a reflection period after this to talk more about what hope looks like for you and how we can be doing more as individuals and as a fellowship to make our Earth more sustainable. Let's build our collective environmental hope muscle together. May it be so.